He is openly saying if the president gets shot at, you can't run against him. You have to drop.
One thing that we do know, apparently, is that the shooter was targeting President Trump. This makes the second assassination attempt against the former president of the United States and Republican nominee for president in about 8 weeks, which is insane. Obviously, this is unprecedented in modern American history. This many attempts on a candidate for higher office this close together. And that does say something about the environment in which we now live. First of all, it says, does anyone even remember the first assassination attempt? I mean, those of us who are on the right do, because it's become sort of an iconic video and photo present.
It was an iconic video and photo. Nobody cares about it. It's like, yeah, man, maybe that should have been your first indication to recognize that just what people fucking hate him, dude. You can't keep pumping a narrative when people are just not even remotely interested in it, you know?
President Trump nearly being hit in the head by a bullet, somebody behind him being killed.
Leftists are the real haters? I mean, yeah.
Him getting up and shaking his fist and saying, fight. That became an iconic photo of President Trump. But it's been largely memory hold by the media. In the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, it was not even mentioned once by the moderators anytime in that debate. It's basically been treated as though it never happened. Now, we all know that if somebody had a
what could be a mention of the Trump attempted assassination from the moderators? Like, what could they say? Madam Vice President, do you consider the Trump attempted assassination photo to be iconic? Yes or no? Madam President, Madam Vice President, this is a yes or no question. Like, what are you saying? Like, what, how could that, he's just so, oh God, he's given up, dude. Ben, you've given up. What kind of argument are you making in here? Like, what are you saying? Like, he's not even thinking this through. At least back in the day, he put a little bit more goddamn effort into these fucking stupid ass videos.
Attempted to shoot Joe Biden in the head, that would have been not only the biggest story in America that day, but for all the other days, because January 6th has now lasted for 4.
It could have easily been said by the moderators. No, when you're conducting a presidential debate, you have a bunch of obvious issues that you're going to get to. Explain to me how you would have brought up the Trump attempted assassination as a moderator for ABC, as a journalist, as a political commentator, as a news anchor. How would you bring that up? Why would you bring that up? Number one. And how would you bring that up? It's not even a thing Trump talks about. Due to the attempted assassination of a former president's life, what does this say about the political climate we live in now? Okay, but that's not about Trump being fucking shot in the ear. You know that, right? And also, the counter to that is not favoring Donald Trump, because the story doesn't favor Donald Trump. Because immediately, Kamala Harris goes, it's completely unacceptable, as I've said time and time again. And you know what's also unacceptable? The fact that Americans can just purchase a gun with ease without any background checks. Boom, it's over. That's not a good question to ask in a fucking debate. When you got environmental issues, you got abortion, you got immigration, you got the economy. There is a finite amount of time to ask questions. And in that finite amount of time, they're not going to fucking waste it with some dumb shit. Oh, what do you think about Trump getting almost assassinated? Is a stupid fucking question.
4 long years. If somebody had actually come within millimeters of killing President Biden, then presumably that would have been the biggest story in America for months on end. It would have deeply and dramatically shaped.
Gun control issues are very important, to be fair. Wait, what do you mean? They did bring up gun control. There was a school shooting that happened right before the debate. Yeah, they brought up gun control, a huge issue.
The 2024 election. The same thing holds true if, God forbid, somebody had attempted to shoot, say, Kamala Harris. This would be the second time in 8 weeks that somebody tried to shoot Donald Trump. And again, this will be buried by Wednesday. How long do you think this story is actually going to last? Now, they say we still don't know the motive of the original shooter. It seems to me the motive was pretty clear, that he wanted to shoot Donald Trump in the head. But there's all sorts of mysterious circumstances surrounding the original shooter. Who was he? We know his identity. We don't know much about his motive. He apparently had encrypted phones and all the rest. It's all very mysterious and all very weird. We don't know anything about this shooter as of yet. We do know that there were foreign sources attempting to create the conditions for the assassination of President Trump, particularly Iran. There are open reports by the FBI. And
Ben, you saw the fucking shooter, dog. Like, you think he was an Iranian agent? Like, honestly, you saw the former shooter, not this one. But this one is fucking really stupid too. You think the registered Republican from Butler was a fucking Iranian agent? Like, what are you, stupid? Yeah, the white registered Republican who was 20 years old was an Iranian assassin, dude. And now this time around, the former Trump Republican who voted for him in 2016 is a registered Iranian agent.
And the CIA, that the Iranians were attempting to facilitate the murder of President Trump. So it wouldn't be a total tremendous shock if it turns out that somebody had taken them up on that offer. Again, this is all speculative. There's no way to know at this point. The one thing that we do know, again, is that if the situation were reversed, it would be the center of the news.
They did bring up gun control. That's why Kamala said she's gadded up. You don't remember? Kamala Harris was like, I stay strapped, baby. I always keep that thing on me. That's what she said.
For the foreseeable future. Why? Because the entire narrative would be that the right had polarized American politics to the extent that it was now considered within the norm to take a shot at a president of the United States or a presidential candidate from the other party. So the shoe is on the other foot now. How is it that the entire Democratic Party can center on the idea that Donald Trump is Orange Hitler, that he's the worst person who has ever lived, he's the worst person in the universe, a danger, a threat to American democracy? Two separate people attempt to shoot him 2 separate times within 8 weeks. And that has nothing to do with the climate in the country. Again, I'm not blaming any of the people who say these sorts of things for the actual shooting. The person who's responsible is the shooter. It also happens to be the case, however, that in a really volatile climate, if you continue to increase the temperature, if you continue over and over to increase that temperature, you are going to get worse and worse.
It's pretty funny that they have this kind of smoke for Donald Trump, but then they like don't think about it as far as like Haitian immigrants that they are regularly fucking trying to kill by making up shit about them. That's really interesting. Words are violence, you say. And it like doesn't make sense for Trump because the Democrats never talk about Trump with the actual fucking terms that he deserves. Like Donald Trump has 100% advocated for violence against his political enemies. He has. He's done it time and time again. Donald Trump has also gone beyond that in terms of like advocating for violence against like migrants, advocating for violence against like different subsects of the American population. He does it all the time. He has motivated multiple mass shooters who have named him by name. Multiple mass shooters during his presidency said that they love Donald Trump or they used to love Donald Trump and now they are even more radical than Donald Trump, like the synagogue shooter. And it's really interesting that we just don't think about that at all in this equation. And that the real violence actually is saying Trump is a meanie bobini. If I had, as a political commentator, a fan of mine go out and actively do an act of terrorism in Canada and then mention me by name to the authorities as my point of radicalization, I'd be very careful about the words or violence narrative. Now, of course, this didn't happen to me. This happened to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro had a fan literally do this. Ben is trying to turn around. Multiple fans of Ben and Tim Pool have done mass shootings and stuff, but this one straight up said his name, said his videos caused him to become like anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. You can't really point to what the Democrats say in general in terms of like advocacy for violence. There was a guy who worked with Bernie Sanders, who was a Bernie Sanders door knocker. He got an AR-15 and went to the congressional baseball game. He shot a bunch of congresspersons at the congressional baseball game. He shot Steve Scalise right in the ass and Steve Scalise now has to piss into a bag for the rest of his life. Do you understand why nobody was like Bernie Sanders' violent rhetoric was responsible for this? Because Bernie Sanders has never said a goddamn thing that is violent remotely. That's the reason. They definitely did try to launch that narrative. It didn't work. My point is, for Ben, he says violent shit on a regular basis. He does blood libel on a regular basis against marginalized communities, against people that don't deserve it, people that cause no harm to others, and people who are oftentimes in underserved communities with no mechanism of pushback, no way to defend themselves adequately. And yet, when those guys are victim to hate crimes, led by Ben Shapiro's fan base, led by people who are directly in Ben Shapiro's audience, then words are not violence. What are you talking about? I'm just doing political commentary. Anybody could do that. But when Democrats turn around and say Trump is a bad person, he's a meanie bobini, and he's a dictator, he said it himself, he wants to be a dictator for one day, that's unacceptable. You can't fucking even repeat Donald Trump's words back because that might cause people to shoot him. That's crazy. You can't make this fucking argument. Yeah, Quebec City mosque shooter scoured Twitter for Trump right-wing figures before attack. Bizonet also appears to have obsessively visited Twitter accounts of Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Fox News personalities David Duke, the former leader of the KKK, Alex Jones, conspiracy theorist Mike Cernovich, Richard Spencer, white nationalist and senior White House advisor Kellyanne Conway. Bizonet checked in on the Twitter account of Ben Shapiro, the editor-in-chief of the conservative news site Daily Wire, 93 times in the month leading up to the shooting.
Raising that temperature does in fact become a sin when you know that things are this bad. And so it behooves everybody on the left side of the aisle to take down the temperature a few notches, to stop pretending that Donald Trump is a grave threat to the Republic. And by the way, they don't even believe that.
Wait, what the fuck are you saying? Trump says that about the Democrats all the time too, dumbass. Like, that's just politics. What are you saying? It's so funny that this guy is literally like, listen, dude, it's completely unacceptable to run against the Republican Party. Like, that's all he's saying. Make no mistake. He is openly saying if the president gets shot at, you can't run against him. You have to drop. It is unacceptable to say you disagree with a man if he had attempted assassinations on him.
Last week, Joe Biden put on a MAGA hat. He put on a Trump 2024 hat. Would he do that if he actually thought that the...
It's not just politics. We should stop normalizing this. What? Normalizing what? Two fucking political candidates? Dude, the extreme centrism jumped out and slapped me in the face. No, you're right. Both candidates should actually stop running against one another and hold hands, which low-key isn't like that far off at this point with like a couple exceptions. You know, the Democrats are doing that actively. So you might be a Democrat.
Trump 2024 hat were the equivalent of a swastika? Of course he would not. Would he really do that if he thought that Donald Trump was going to facilitate a tyrannical takeover of the country and end our democracy? Of course not. It's all nonsense. It's all been done for political gain. So again, we don't have all the details at this point. We're still...
Yeah, but when Trump fucking lies about Haitians eating cats and dogs, that's not for political gain. And that isn't violent inherently. And isn't it begging for violence upon those people? It's actually good and normal, and you should say it more.